Hello, everybody. Welcome to GeoAI Bytes, our regular live streaming session where we share industry observations, tech tutorials, machine learning models based on current events, and much more. Now, I'm Dan, Content Marketing Manager here at Picterra, and today we're focusing on EUDR compliance, a topic that's been generating a lot of discussion lately, especially today, as we'll find out. Joining me today is Tony Myers, editor of CocoaRadar and former editor of Confectionary News. Tony, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Hello, everyone. Well, the EUDR is indeed a significant topic right now, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. And we have some really breaking news hot off the press to discuss as well.
Yeah, we do indeed. Great to have you, Tony. Thanks for joining us. And for those who might not be familiar with your work, could you share a bit about your background and what you're doing at CocoaRadar?
Sure, certainly. I've been covering the confectionery cocoa industry for almost a decade now. But interesting fact, I grew up in the city of York, which is famous for its two chocolate factories, Rowntree's and Terry's. So it's kind of in my blood, in my conscience, certainly chocolate and cocoa. So it's been wonderful to find out more about this wonderful product. I was the former editor of Confectionary News, but I'm now currently building my new platform from the desk of CocoaRadar, where we focus on market trends, sustainability initiatives, and industry developments. And of course, recently, the EUDR has been a major point of interest over the last 12, 18 months or so to our sector.
Yeah, it certainly has. You mentioned Terry's. Maybe thinking of Terry's chocolate orange, which was my
Absolutely.
favorite chocolate snack back when I lived in the UK. I'm now in Spain, so I
Yep.
miss a chocolate orange these days. So we're going to kick things off straight away, and actually we're going to address the kind of elephant in the room that we have, and that's around the breaking news that we had today around some updates from the EC. So Tony, fill us in, kind of what's been going on today.
Absolutely. Well, I've literally come hot from the desk of CocoaRadar. I'm writing an article. I'm trying to get analysis and comment from senior stakeholders on this news. It's quite a shock, highly surprising. A lot of people were predicting it, expecting it, wanting it. Equally, many people, many companies, many organizations urging the EC to hold fast, go ahead with the legislation as planned, the transition period. And now, as you say, Dan, we got this news just landed from Brussels, European Commission about an hour ago. And it's been quite a morning. News and reaction is still coming out on the European Commission's decision to delay the law by 12 months. So instead of coming into force on 30th December 2024, which we're all gearing up for, the law will now be applicable on 30th December 2025 for large companies. And for smaller companies, micro companies, 30th of June 2026. So the whole thing's been shifted. The whole transition period has been shifted by 12 months. It should be noted that the delay will now need to sign off for both the European Parliament and 27 member states. So this is the Brussels bureaucracy. It will have to grind into activation. And if the EC extends the transition period at this stage, it will necessitate a change in regulations, I would imagine, adding further confusion, frustration, anxiety, particularly among small operators. And also, Dan, what about the cost implications? Many operators, large and small, have invested large sums of money on their due diligence statements. They have them all ready to go. They're just waiting for the delays being in Brussels. They just have not got their side of the legislation ready. The information system, the registry. There's been lots of anxiety about how ready it is. There's been concerns from some players in the industry around the lack of clarity on key elements, and also about the difficulties around the current information system just basically being not fit for purpose. So this is questioning its capability to process the millions of farm data, I guess, which companies like yourselves will be handling to adequately and highlighted uncertainties about how competent authorities will interpret the legislation. So sorry, I'm kind of, it's been exciting. I'm trying to digest it all myself, but it would appear that the EC has bowed to that pressure with this postponement. So Dan, we are here to discuss, among other things, how technologies like space data, can play a role in helping companies meet these EUDR compliance requirements. That still stays the same when the law comes in, but I guess the pressure is off for now for some operators. But what's your take on this, and how can space data be used for EUDR compliance, like what your company offers operators?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, even with the delay that, as you mentioned, has to be approved by the European Parliament, it still does necessitate that small businesses and large businesses from that kind of date that we have are compliant with the EU's deforestation regulation. And of course, the main objective, for those of you who don't know, hopefully everyone who's joined the call does know a little bit about the EUDR, but is to ensure that commodities like coffee, like cocoa, that we're principally going to talk about today with Tony, like timber, but many others are not sourced from deforested areas. And only goods that is sourced from land that hasn't been deforested since actually the cut-off date of December the 31st, 2020, so going back a few years, will be allowed into Europe under this regulation. So it's really groundbreaking regulation. There's really there to help minimize deforestation caused by products landing within the EU. But yes, space data. Let's come on to how space data can actually be a really essential part in ensuring that companies can become EUDR compliant. So data, especially from Earth observation satellites, of which more and more are going up into space every day, and of course GPS technology, is becoming very, very essential for this compliance. Now, since operators themselves are required to collect precise geolocation information of their production plots and provide evidence that the commodities are deforestation free post that cutoff date back in 2020, satellite imagery offers a really practical solution to do this. By analyzing satellite images, companies can monitor land use over time to ensure that no deforestation or indeed forest degradation, which is included within the UDR, has occurred within their sourcing plots. This spatial information really helps in conducting the due diligence that the EUDR mandates. However, it's really important to mention that relying on just a single data set or a map isn't sufficient to guarantee compliance. By combining multiple sources of spatial data, we can provide a more accurate and comprehensive view of what's actually going on. So this integrated approach enhances the reliability of the entire verification process. Now, at Picterra, we've been working on ways to make this technology more accessible to businesses who need to comply with the EUDR, and it's a wide range and raft of businesses. By leveraging Earth observation, EO data, alongside advanced analytics and AI, companies can more effectively monitor their entire supply chain and meet the regulations requirements. So as we've mentioned, Tony, these requirements, they're pretty fluid right now. So do you know if the EC has updated guidelines, its frequently asked questions? What more do you know about the current situation, and also in regards to what's happening with cocoa?
Sure. I think I've still a huge adrenaline rush from the news, so I'll try to kind of calm down a little bit and provide more clarity. There was a mention in the press release of the main bone of contention, I think, even for those companies that wanted, and stakeholders that wanted desperately the EUDR to go through on time. There was a lot of consternation that the EC had not released updated guidelines and FAQs on the legislation, and that was causing a lot of anxiety. So I understand today that the new guidance has been issued. It's divided into 11 chapters, covering a diverse range of issues such as legality requirements, time frame of application, agricultural use, and clarifications on the product scope. All of these are supported by tangible scenarios. In addition, the latest FAQs also published today features over 40 new additional answers to address questions raised by a diverse range of stakeholders from all around the world. I haven't found it yet on the EC website, but hopefully we'll be publishing the links in an article I'm writing for CocoaRadar straight after our chat. But the core legislation, and this is important, stays the same, which is, I think we got a slide there as well. So I'll just go through these. This is how it stands at the moment. This has been written in stone right from when the law came into being in 2023. And the guidelines state that cocoa and chocolate products, items made from cocoa harvested during the transition period, can be sold after the regulations application date. Derived products, products processed after the application date but made from cocoa harvested during the transition period, can also be sold in the EU. Mixed ingredients. If a product is partly made with cocoa placed on the EU market before the application date and partly with cocoa placed after, only the portion that was placed after December the 30th, 2024, it says here, but now that will change to 2025, is subject to the full EUDR obligations. Now, the main takeaway from these scenarios is that commodities like cocoa, derived products during the transition period can still be sold in the EU market under specific conditions, which are cocoa and chocolate items made from cocoa can be sold after the regulations application date, so long as they were placed on the EU market, again, before December the 30th, 2024. That will change to 2025. Operators must provide conclusive and verifiable evidence, such as bills of landing or customs receipts, to prove this. I think this will be in the due diligence statements. This is DDS, is the abbreviation that they're using. Deprived products processed after the application date but made from cocoa harvested during the transition period, can also be sold in the EU. The key is that ingredients must have been placed on the EU market before December the 30th, 2024. Now that will change to 2025, with operators again needing to provide solid evidence. Mixed ingredients. If a product is partly made with cocoa placed on the EU market before the application date and partly with cocoa placed after, only the portion that was placed after December the 30th, 2025 now is subject to full EUDR obligations. Operators must distinguish between the two and provide evidence for the ingredients placed on the market before the cutoff date. It's a lot to, it's a complex law. It's no wonder it's been postponed in a way. It's a lot for people to get their head around, with the best intentions to try and comply with all of this. It's a complex supply chain we have in the cocoa and chocolate industry, and there's no surprise that it has been delayed. So I can see the common sense in that, although people will be highly disappointed about this move. But the common thread here is that any commodities and derived products produced during the transition period and placed on the EU market before December the 30th, 2025 are exempt from the new EUDR compliance requirements. However, it's crucial for operators to collect and maintain conclusive and verifiable evidence to prove when their products were placed on the market. In this context, placing on the market is interpreted as being customs cleared within the EU. So for businesses, the emphasis during this transition period is on thorough documentation, keeping accurate records like bills of landing, customs receipts will be essential to demonstrate compliance and ensure that their products can continue to be sold in the EU without interruption. So
great. I mean, thanks for that update, Tony. Quite comprehensive. But I think what it says to me is it really underscores the importance of being prepared ahead of these compliance deadlines, not just at the end of this year, but the end of next year with the kind of delay to the deadline, but really being prepared. And that's a step where the companies like Picterra can step in. But it also means that operators themselves need to start collecting that plot information if they haven't already from the supply chains to be able to carry out this deforestation analysis in the first place. So a really critical kind of first step to ensure EUDR compliance. But you might wonder, first of all, is it just enough to have the location of the farm, the kind of the broad location? And simple answer here is no. EUDR compliance really requires specific field boundaries, not just the general farm location. Simply knowing where a farm is located doesn't give you the level of detail needed to verify that actually no deforestation has occurred within that specific plot.
Okay, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense, Dan. And where you're looking at the where you look at it. But what if an operator doesn't have detailed field locations? Where should they start? This is a question that has been coming up many times over the last 18 months.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, quite often you might not have these field boundaries.
Yeah.
So often the first step is to engage with local cooperatives, local associations, and they can often provide a list of farmers with a number of hectares per farmer and their approximate locations, villages, towns, or general areas, for example. Now, this information does give you a starting point. And from there, you can use tools like Picterra's field identification features to create precise field boundaries. Now, I've got a little example just on screen now.
Hmm.
And this is what we like to refer to as our bubblegum process internally. We started using that name externally as well because we think it's kind of a fun name. But it's designed to improve upon the basic method of placing a circle at a commodity plot coordinate. And that's just simply not sufficient for an accurate mapping or indeed EUDR compliance. And you can see kind of in the graphic we have on screen now how this works. So taking that approximate location, taking the area details that you have, the tool actually goes in and automatically maps out the field boundaries for you by analyzing all sorts of patterns within that satellite imagery. So it detects lots of changes in canopy cover itself, the roads, the paths, the grasslands that may be there, to really guide the creation of these accurate plot outlines. And this results in a much more precise mapping of the fields than simply drawing a circle on a map.
That's very interesting. I'm just making a note there. And one of the issues that's come up that I've realized from talking with suppliers in the field. I've been to Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. I've seen the conditions that some of the farmers work in, some of the farmers live in. And so, what about farmers who don't have access to strong internet connections or apps to create these field boundaries themselves?
Yeah, and as you say, that quite often is the case. So in those cases, the responsibility really falls on the operators here to assist.
Yeah.
So again, starting with those local cooperatives, starting with those local associations is key. They can help to gather the data on the farmers, including those, as I mentioned, locations and approximate sizes. And with that information, you can use tools like this to create those boundaries on behalf of the farmers. And once you have those boundaries, it's important, of course, to match them with lists provided by the cooperatives or associations. And this helps to ensure that the reporting is as accurate as possible as it can be, and that you are in compliance with the EUDR requirements.
Okay. And another question as well I have is, once companies have collected all this information, how can they ensure that data quality is up to standard for compliance purposes? And I just want to add that the EU, the EC, their attitude is their stance is that it's the data is it's binary. It's either compliant or non-compliant. There's no room for negotiation. They're not going to give any kind of there's no qualification in that, isn't it? It's yes or no, and that. So how can companies make sure that it is ready?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, ensuring high quality data right at the start of this process is essential. Accurate compliance starts at the very beginning with high quality data. So after you've collected these field boundaries and all the related information, this should be validated for accuracy and completeness. Now, this might involve cross-referencing satellite imagery with ground truth data. It might involve performing spot checks in collaboration with local partners. But as you can see on screen now, we have a lot of tools that can not only help in just the mapping and analytics, but also in validating the data to make sure that it meets compliance standards. So our platform uses a combination of geospatial deep learning techniques to really detect inconsistencies, detect any anomalies in the data, which allows you to address any issues before they even start becoming compliance problems. Now, actually, we just posted some updates that we had recently from a recent update to the guidelines for the GeoJSON files that are required by the EU Traces system. And it really kind of underlines and underscores the paramount importance of data cleanup for EUDR compliance. So check out after the call, we do have a few examples of how to correct polygons that might have a hole in the middle, for example, if there's a patch of land that's not being covered, any self-intersecting polygons that become invalid, and any incorrect vertices that have these kind of inner and outer loops as well. And we've got a great kind of animation and graphic that shows you how we validate and fix these quite common errors that the EC is actually finding when these GeoJSON files are being submitted to the system.
Wow, that's. I'm just looking at this now. I find it fascinating. And the kind of work that Picterra is doing at the moment in this field is it's thorough, um, without a doubt. But I've got a couple more questions. I just come.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is just the kind of start of the process. If we delve into the deforestation analysis
Yeah,
itself, we can
yeah.
look at some of the methodologies involved as well.
That's a big one as well, isn't it? I mean, and what I want to ask you again is there a recommended or commonly accepted methodology for analyzing deforestation in farm plots? What are you working with there?
Yeah, good question, because actually there's no real official or mandated methodology that's been specified by the EU. And there's actually a good reason for that. It's actually very challenging to endorse a single method because different data sets that you're using, different models, might interpret forests in various ways. Different definitions of what constitutes a forest, varying sensitivities, and you can lead to false positives and negatives. Now, one method that might work well for soybeans or for cattle, these are commodities within the EUDR scope, might not be suitable for cocoa or timber, because actually distinguishing between natural forest and tree plantations can be tricky. So the EU is encouraging the industry to collaborate, working with our partners, and develop methodologies that really fit specific needs. And this promotes better supply chain traceability overall. Now, that said, one commonly accepted framework that actually we're using as well is called WISP. Now, Tony, I'm going to put you on the spot here just to make sure you know this thing. Do you know what WISP stands for?
I don't know. I'm very sorry.
Okay, what WISP stands for actually what is in that plot? That was I accidentally
Okay,
put you on the spot, but it's been endorsed by the FAO.
right.
But even WISP itself isn't a fixed methodology. So it allows users to input their own data, they can set thresholds, choose which data sets to use, meaning that the responsibility still lies with the user to be as strict or as lenient as necessary. Now, as mentioned, we follow a very similar approach to the WISP methodology. Now, and we really believe in having our transparent methodologies. When we talk about our methodologies, we ensure that they have independent verification so that the assessments are robust and they're incredibly trustworthy.
Okay, well, I'm going to put you on the spot now, Dan, because I want to know more about Picterra's solution and how it fits into this. And I want to ask you, what do you know about ground truthing?
Yeah, no, good. You're well in your right to put me back on the spot again. So, as I mentioned, we're kind of based upon this WISP methodology. It's from the Forest Data Partnership, as you can see in the slide right now. And this partnership itself includes renowned organizations like the World Resources Institute, FAO, as we mentioned before, and indeed Google. So we integrate all existing, all published, all available data sets we can get our hands on to get a really comprehensive understanding of any given plot of land. So rather than having a proprietary, rather than having a black box map layer, as some suppliers do, we leverage renowned academic, renowned institutional work from incredibly trusted sources. And by having this transparent approach, we're helping to build trust. And it actually really counters any perception that we're simply just rebranding public data without adding any real value to it. So by combining several forest layers, we want to get closer to the concept of undisturbed forest as defined by the EUDR. So, for instance, we use tropical moist forest layer, the forest coverage data that also includes canopy cover percentages. And by incorporating canopy height models in such a way, we really align with the EUDR's definition of trees being at least 5 meters tall. We also look at historical data and national plantation layers to account for any prior land usage that may have changed in the past. So by analyzing all this data from sources like the WRI, like ETH Zurich as well, which I haven't mentioned already, we aim for really precise forest mapping that meets and even exceeds EUDR compliance standards.
That sounds incredibly thorough. And what I want to ask now is, should operators conduct a risk assessment for each shipment that is sent separately, or is it better to prepare everything in advance? We talked, there's a huge cost potential in all of this, isn't it? What's the most cost-effective way, would you say, and the most obviously the most thorough and concise way to do these risk assessments?
Yeah, I mean we've heard this question a few times from the partners we're working with, and it's definitely better to be proactive in this case. Recommending contacting all potential suppliers ahead of time to gather these field boundaries for every single farmer who might produce the raw materials that you're sourcing. Now, of course, once you have that data, you can conduct a really comprehensive risk assessment to understand any potential issues within the supply chain. When it comes to the reporting side of things, you'll need to do this on a per transaction and traded volume basis. But if you prepared it in advance, this process becomes much, much smoother, helps minimize any delays when you're managing the overall shipments.
Okay, but that makes sense. I mean, I'm sure it does to the people that are involved in this. It's still I'm still struggling with all of this kind of compliance stuff, but it does what you say. It does. It's adding clarity certainly to the whole process. But what happens if after the risk assessment, an operator finds many fields with a high risk of deforestation and can't import these volumes into the EU?
Yeah, again, a frequently asked question, and it's a tough spot, obviously, but there is still a path forward for these operators. As mentioned, we use the FAO's methodology, um, analyzing multiple data layers, sometimes actually up to 6 or 7 at once, to assess this deforestation risk. And if several layers indicate a high risk, we'll classify those fields accordingly, which means that, yep, they can't be used for EU trade underneath the EUDR. However, you can conduct actually a more in-depth analysis. So by using a very high resolution imagery, say 0.5 meter resolution, you can scan the region more precisely. Now, our models can then automatically identify tropical forests, distinguish them from agricultural trees, for example. And this detailed assessment can sometimes validate fields that were previously flagged as high risk, allowing actually those volumes to be imported into the EU after all.
So I'm just taking that in as well. It's pretty crucial. So understanding the EUDR's definition of a forest is pretty crucial, right? You've got to really look at the fine print there to make sure you are fully compliant, or operators are fully compliant. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And this is a kind of an area where a lot of suppliers of these kind of solutions will often kind of fall down, let's say. One global layer doesn't capture the current definition. So we need to be very meticulous. For example, the EU's Forest Observatory 2020 includes agricultural trees, which can cause inaccuracies. And that's why we combine several forest layers to align more closely to that notion of undisturbed forest prior to 2021. As mentioned, data that includes canopy cover percentage and canopy height to meet those requirements, analyze historical land use, check for prior conversions, and by integrating all these multiple data sources, ensuring precise forest mapping and helping those operators achieve compliance. And we kind of touched upon this earlier in the conversation,
Mhm.
Tony. Now, this is a lot of effort, sometimes a lot of resources required
Yeah,
for
yeah.
compliance on the kind of operator side. We try to take that effort away, of course, using the solutions that we offer. But a significant question still kind of arises. So, who's responsible in the supply chain for funding these initiatives and solutions? What are the kind of conversations you've been part of, been hearing? within particularly the cocoa industry?
I mean that's a crucial point. I'm just conscious of the time. We are over our 30 minutes, but it's obviously with what's going on right at this time. I think we're allowed a little bit of extra time to talk about this, and it's the funding responsibilities as well. I want to get to as a crucial point, and uh, I'm just looking. I'm going back to what it means to the operators and the prime responsibility for funding compliance initiatives under the EUDR lies with the companies placing products on the EU market. For the big companies, that's not such an issue. These are the companies are the operators or exporters who are directly subject to the regulation. Now, starting on 2025, December 2025 now, any company that wants to place relevant products on the EU market must first upload a due diligence statement, DDS, to their competent national authority via a dedicated information system that the EU Commission will establish. And that's the crux of the problem right now. But by issuing this due diligence statement, these companies are essentially assuming responsibility for their products' compliance with the EUDR. This means that they're on the hook, not just for meeting the regulatory requirements, but also for funding the necessary compliance activities. However, the reality on the ground can be a bit more complex. In many cases, entities further up the supply chain, like local aggregators, producer organizations, might not have the budget or resources to carry out the comprehensive compliance work. And I know this has been causing a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress when you go up that supply chain. But these organizations often lack the funding, the certification costs, or the capacity to handle detailed mapping and data collection. Now, while the EU may suggest that tasks like polygon mapping are low-cost activities, doing them thoroughly requires training, resources, and time, commodities that first-level suppliers may not possess. So what happens then? The responsibility and the associated cost often shift to downstream actors in the value chain. This could be the buyers who purchase from the initial suppliers and then sell to the operators, or the traders in Europe. It's a very complex supply chain. In some cases, it's the EU-based operators or traders themselves who commit resources to ensure compliance. It's a mixed bag, and the situation can vary across different sectors, geographies, and commodities, and that's very important as well. Some specialty producers may have the means to fund compliance activities, especially if they can command a premium for their products or have a secured grants from funding bodies. But generally speaking, it's the entities with the most at stake in terms of market access, the companies placing the products on the EU market, that end up shouldering the financial responsibility for compliance. The Commission has noted that downstream operators, this won't change with the delay, and large traders aren't necessarily required to check every single due diligence statement submitted upstream. This means that while they must ensure compliance, they don't have to individually verify every data point provided by their suppliers. So, the answer to the question really is responsibility is the primary obligation lies with the company placing the product on the EU market. The operators are the exporters. We've got now another year, and these companies must upload due diligence statements to their competent national authority through a dedicated system. And by doing so, they assume responsibility for the product's compliance with the EUDR. It's the cost as well, Dan. Can you give any costs, not without giving away any kind of business secrets or anything? Is it expensive to get these due diligence statements together?
Maybe it all depends on the kind of work that's involved, the areas and hectares that are involved, the actual process needs to be carried out, if there's data cleaning that needs to be carried out, or if that actually the data is pretty clean already. The steps that are involved within the kind of overall process and workflow really determines the price. So I would, suggest that anyone who wants to find out can get in touch, and we can give an accurate kind of quotation. We've covered a lot of ground, Tony, and before you kind of merge into the forest you have there behind you, which I can see is happening.
Definitely disguise. So we have a couple of questions as well, Dan. I can.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, because I wanted to kind of wrap up the session. We've
Yeah.
discussed how space data can aid in compliance and delved into some of the challenge methodologies, and we've even covered that breaking news about the
Yes.
delay to the requirements. So we are going to take some questions now. So if anyone has them, do pop them into the interface, whatever you're using. If you're on LinkedIn, pop them into the messages section of the event, or indeed if you're joining us from another platform, YouTube,
Yeah.
Facebook, or further afield, then do pop those questions in and they'll come through to us. Tony, you mentioned that a couple have
Yes,
come through
I've seen
already.
one. I don't know where it's come from, but someone's raised a very good point. Risk assessment is at the moment the EU, the EC guidelines are for the high risk, low risk, medium risk countries, aren't they? So obviously we're generally focusing for some reason on West Africa. That's where a lot of the deforestation problems are. But of course there are operators maybe even listening into the state in South America, Latin America, with different challenges. What's Picterra doing to cover the different regions and this so-called high risk, low risk, medium risk um, areas? Is there a difference to how you would operate in those areas?
Yeah, good question. And I mean, the simple answer is no, not really, because we, as well as being a kind of imagery agnostic platform, we're kind of agnostic with the types of data and geographies that we deal with it as well. And we do obviously have a lot of partners and customers in many regions, commodity producing regions around the world. So we do have experience in kind of the geographies that you've already mentioned. So we don't distinguish in terms of the kind of methodology that we use, although there may be kind of specific
Hmm.
layers that we do use rather than others, depending on the local geography. So we kind of do refine, let's say, some of the layers that are being used within that overall methodology.
Okay. I think that's all I can see at the moment. We can follow up questions, can't we, after this session on
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if anyone has any questions, especially with regards to kind of announcements that have happened today, uh,
absolutely.
do pop them onto the various channels that you're joining us from, and we'll do our best to answer them as and when. So really, let's wrap up. We've got a couple of links for you to get some more information. So you can download a free EUDR guide, either using that little bit.ly link that you see on screen right now, or if you're on a desktop device, then you can snap the QR code in the top left-hand corner. So I'll give it a couple of seconds just for folks to do that. There's also the link there, a bit.ly link to subscribe to CocoaRadar as well.
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you. So I guess business as normal, would we say, Dan? Does it affect anything that you're doing? Does it give you a
No,
bit more time? Does it make it easier?
most certainly business as usual. I'd say get in contact with us about your EUDR compliance requirements, and the kind of earlier that you do this, the better, rather than leaving it to the last minute. So most definitely business as usual.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if now the EUDR story will kind of just, fade into the background a bit. There'll be other. It's going to be interesting because it's been the news has been all EUDR for certainly the last 10 months or so this year, and now I wonder what will happen. I wonder how it will pan out. We'll have to see. We'll have to keep on watching the updates and see what happens next, I guess.
Yeah, and let's not forget, the EUDR really is, as I mentioned at the start of the call, it's really a groundbreaking, let's
Oh,
say,
yeah.
sorry, piece of legislation, and it's
Yeah.
world leading in terms of the markets around the world. It's not just about compliance. We talked about that a lot today, but it's a significant step towards combating global deforestation, promoting sustainable practices, and the positive impact that the EUDR can have on our planet is immense. By ensuring commodities are sourced responsibly, we're contributing to the preservation of forests worldwide and also increasing biodiversity and addressing climate change as well. So yes, it does present challenges, but it's an opportunity for companies to innovate, to really lead within their sustainability efforts.
And
And
that's
embracing the EUDR can enhance not just your brand reputation, but also meet the growing consumer demand themselves for ethically sourced products.
And I think that's a very positive note to end on. I think that's where watch this space, as we say, and thank you, Dan, for inviting me on. It's great to find out and discover a bit more about what Picterra does in this fascinating field. Good luck with your endeavors and making it as smooth as possible for operators.
Yeah, many thanks, Tony. It's been a real pleasure actually discussing these important topics with you. I hope we can do this again soon. Thank you for sharing your expertise today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Don't forget to get any questions in that you may have. We look forward to seeing you on the next GeoAI Bytes session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.